she only did it sorry. He didn't know how this worked. Yeah. And then she didn't know another. Yeah, he was gone. You're kind of stinging. I was seeing my brother. Well, I used to know the Demeter's age. But she's still. We'll start together meeting your team. Just somebody would catch us. Yeah. Yeah. Phyllis has stones. What is it? Yeah, that's a crowd. Oh, so take care. Oh, so I forgot. Sir, we're going to be here during the form. I just keep up the law. Some there's a bunch of guys made that register a petition in August. So 750 that changed the yeah, the superiors. Oh, lately so it was so rainy. You know, the first try they really do. I should take it too much. Yeah, right. Oh, it's right. You were being heard if you were in the audience. You wanted to see that thing from and you tell you said thank you. Yeah. Not only then no. I'll take care. Run down. All right. They are honestly, you know, Chuck up and down Becky said, no. Well, we need to get him on the list. I don't. I told him last month that I'm sure we did. He needs to. No, that's what my wife said. I miss Sanders. The unicorn groceries. I'm the usher in this year. What's that? Okay. Oh yeah. Oh really? My name's on the wall. It's oh, really? Well, you might tell Cynthia. Oh no, there's no reason they shouldn't be on there. Right? They just not really love me. I didn't. I'll have to look that up. Well, I don't know the darn best. It's your post. Well, he and I were going to work something at the Central Library this afternoon. But then he's looking at painting, painting my house and put it ready. So he's missing. He's still just for what I'm telling you about black baseball doesn't. But I don't know. I don't know if he's. I don't know if he's gonna come and get moved there. I have no idea. I never know. And daylight savings time got everybody all confused today. So. Talking about getting rid of the United States. I think it's kind of why since. I wish they would just stay one way. Yeah. Yeah. If they're wishing to do it down the road here. Oh, he goes to the office. Yeah, I mean, it's really screws everything up. I don't believe that. Trouble. What do you think? It's in the article somewhere. Paper anymore, so phone too digital. But I didn't hear it. There's a lot of dissatisfaction. Yeah, what do you think? What's your opinion? I think it's a pain in the house. So on the other hand, can you remember? Or no, you're choosing out. Can you remember when it started? The reason? Well, the reason that I always heard it was like, I was saying images. And I don't believe he does. Well, it wasn't only that, it was for our children too. Yeah, in the dog. In World War II, it was 2 hours ahead instead of just 1. I don't see any big deal about it. Why not say that? Or why not So I have to walk my dog first. You can eat the man right over there. Oh, I didn't notice that. You know, the car. So I'll change up things. Oh, I was gonna say. I was gonna say. We have to look here, right? Well, that's okay. And a lot of it here. That's a part of okay. You're trying to find a job. Okay, with followers. Okay. All right. You know, it's very short. This. So, real. I know you want your point. Well, I guess Kansas City has not controlled their police. And the word with it's a civil war. And then give me my phone back so that the one plays on right? The one that's on else. Yeah. But that's like why says peace. Oh, Carol, you know, she's good. She does. There she is. Who's moderating? Are you gonna moderate? I assume Joe was. Sorry, I don't have any of the. I don't need to moderate. I can moderate. Well, I moderate. But you have enough. You have. I can moderate. I mean, I'll take off right after we're done. So I'm a greeter, so I gotta leave. Okay. Well, no, I'll do it. You got to do it. Okay. Make sure you microphone's clear. Joe, it's your not stack here. No, Joe. Good morning. Welcome to the forum. My name is Craig Vollen. I'm a member of the forum committee. And I appreciate it if, because this is going to be repeated on KKFI, I appreciate it if you would do what I'm going to do here and turn off your cell phone. This morning, we're happy to have Clark Achelpohl. He's a volunteer with More Squared, and he's going to talk to us about why should the police department in Kansas City, Missouri, be supervised or controlled by the state of Missouri, which is a very good question. And we're very thankful that he's here to talk about that. So, Clark.
Thank you. It's good to see you this morning. Um, my name is Clark Achelpohl. I'm a volunteer for More Squared, and I think most of you are well familiar with that, but it's a good chance to give a plug for them. It's about 35 churches in the metro area of all denominations that work both in Kansas City, Kansas, and Missouri uh, for um, racial justice and economic equity. More squared is MORE times 2, and that's Metropolitan Organization for Racial and Economic Equity. We couldn't find a longer name. And I'm talking today, actually, I'm on the other side of that question, why should? It's why don't we change that process? And as you know, there is a movement afoot in Kansas City now to make that change. There are several organizations besides More Square that are interested in that. The the Kansas City Star editorial board has come out for this. NAACP, there's Urban League and ACLU, and uh, our mayor has come out for this too. So uh, More Squared has a campaign, and before we get done with this, you'll be asked to participate in that. Uh, I'll go through briefly some of the situation now and some of the history of how we got here and why, and then I'd like to go through a few police performance measures and talk about Kansas City Police in that process. And then the strategy we have, and that's where you all come in, where we are asking help for you. Well, why does the Kansas City Police Department report to the governor instead of to local officials? Um, we are the only city in the country that has a city police department that is run by the governor. The governor appoints a four-person commission, and then the mayor sits on that. The mayor can vote, but in our case, the mayor is often in the minority as it on the votes. Uh, there are several reasons why that's really a kind of a bad idea. Uh, just plain old fairness. Why is it that we're the only city in the country that um, has to go through the governor to get any change or any movement if we want different kind of policing or changes that way? Another is taxation. There's a state law. Um, Last year, the state law said that Kansas City the city itself had to spend 20% of its budget on the police. And the city has been doing that. Actually, last year they spent 23% of their budget on the police. Um, but no other city is required. Uh, they can manage their own budget. Um, and not only does the state tell the city how much money to spend, the state gives the city little or no input on how that money is spent. And that you may remember that I think it's a little more than a year ago now, the mayor got into a argument with the police commission, and it got all the way to court. And actually, the police commission won that lawsuit. The judge said basically that the city had already appropriated the money to the police, and that additional money over the 20% uh, could not be changed, but they could do it at the time of a budget. Uh, that law has been changed already, and I'll talk more about that a little later. But um, so it's a matter of not only just telling the city how much to spend, but we have little or no say about how that money is spent. And this representation is another problem. Uh, in the last 18 years, only one person living east of Troost has ever served on that five-person commission. Um, and in the last 17 appointees to that commission, uh, there's been three black people, one um, Latino, and no women of color. Everybody else has been white and basically living along up and down state line in um, the more affluent area of Kansas City. And then there is the accountability problem. Um, you may recall that a couple of years ago, the city gave the commission extra money to create a police academy to recruit and train 50 policemen. And the commission said, thank you very much. And a year later, there was no academy. They spent the money someplace else. And the city did not know anything about that until the Kansas City Star issued um, a public um, disclosure on the statistics of the police department, and that's how they found out that the money went someplace else. They were not accountable to the city that asked them to do this at all. And with no accountability, there just is very little transparency either. Uh, I read in the Tennessee Star just I think this week that they were complaining again that the commission held a meeting that should have been open to the public that wasn't, and now they're talking with them about that. I'm not sure where that will go. So those are some of the, I would say, injustices or things that benefits that other cities have that we don't have in how our police department is operated. And how did we get this way? Well, it started with the Civil War. Um, Back in the 1860s, uh, well, I believe it was 1859, there was a governor uh, uh, that was a Confederate, and he, of course, was looking to turn Missouri into a slave state. And St. Louis had the second largest armory in the United States at that time. Uh, and as you can probably guess, they were getting ready to take over the land from Native Americans, and they needed an army and lots of uh, firepower to do that. And so the governor simply went in and took the police department and control the army at that time. Well, then with the beginning of, I believe it was 1860, he was out of office, and the new governor was a unionist, and so he took over the police department and the armory, and they also took over Kansas City's police department as well to try to control which way the state goes slave wise. And it stayed that way until Mr. Tom Pendergast came along, and um, Tom's one of Tom's strengths was that he was able to really deliver a lot of Democratic votes to the governor and to uh, other Democrats. And so he had the power to talk to the governor into giving him control of the Kansas City Police Department. And I understand he really had control. He had full-time paid employees in the Kansas City Police Department. Uh, um, but of course, he got in trouble and wound up in jail. And at that point, there was so much concern that the local mob would still control the police that city fathers gave it back to the governor. And there was probably good reason for that at the time, but that's several years ago now. Uh, and then, kind of the next movement about that was after Martin Luther King's assassination, there were um, bad riots here in town. And so the mayor appointed a commission and they did a study and what can we do to avoid that kind of thing happen again? And of course, one of the things they suggested was get local control of the Kansas City Police Department. Well, it never happened. Um, St. Louis, just a few years ago, I think it was 4 years ago, finally got their control back. But uh, Kansas City chose at that point not to go along with them at the same time. Of course, it takes a state law change to do that. So I'd like to talk a little bit more now about some of the metrics that um, I think make it important to do this. Changing local control, and at this point, we are not in any, we're not pushing for any particular way that might happen. But More Squared has taken the position that we would. There are lots of ways that could happen, and we didn't want to argue about that at this point. We are looking to um, see how much support there is in the community, and of course it'll take community our support outside state as well, and we see that as a long haul kind of thing. But there's local control itself will not fix problems or improve things, but it will make it easier to do that if we it's no guarantee that it's going to make things better, but if the community stays involved and we work, why we can improve the quality of uh, policing that happens in the Kansas City. And there is a lot of room for improvement. Um, I should back up and say that um, the opponents of this are saying that this is anti-police, that it's going to defund the police, and it's going to make things worse. That's not the approach from the group that are trying to make this change. Uh, we want to improve policing policies and make the police more effective and get to the place where the community is more supportive of the police than they are now. Uh, the hostility within the community to the police reduces the number of tips and the quality of the tips that they receive, and so it makes it harder to solve crimes, and it also um, makes it harder for the police to do their job all the way around. There is a nonprofit, national, independent research organization in the country. It's called Police Scoreboard, policescorecard.org. You can Google it, and um, they collect public information and reports from police departments, all police departments in the country, police departments and sheriff's departments. And together, that's more than 13,000 different units that they are. And so they are not, they're objective in the sense that they are not looking to be helpful or against Kansas City Police Department. That's one small area among thousands of other departments. And their main focus is to simply rate and rank on numerous variables how well police departments are doing. And so I would encourage you to Google police scorecard and take a look at that. You can find out about the program and who runs it and that sort of thing. But they also have dozens of um, different aspects. I'm just picking a few here that uh, came to my mind. Kansas City ranks 3 among 104 major police departments. Uh, Police scorecard divides up the police uh, departments by size, and the departments that serve a population of 200,000 or 250,000 or more would be the area that Kansas City is found, and there's 104 of those departments in the country. Kansas City ranks number 3 among the 104 in the number of people they shoot per 10,000 arrests. In other words, there's 101 police departments that know how to do arrests with fewer shootings than Kansas City. Um, Another um, similar kind of figure or metric that they pay attention to is that they say that 90% of the 104 departments. Now, the first one was shooting, and that, of course, would be wounding people too. But 90% of the departments have fewer unarmed victims of deadly force. So both of those figures are 8-year averages. That's not because Kansas City had an outlier year that was particularly high one time. That is a pattern. And that pattern really does suggest to me that there is a culture of trigger happiness within this department that is different than most other large police departments. They found that blacks are arrested a little, almost 3 times as often as whites in Kansas City, uh, and that's counting arrests for low grades, small offenses, um, car tag, speeding, not the murder and violent crimes. And yet the contraband that they find when they make those arrests is essentially the same rate between white arrests and black arrests. So they aren't finding more problems with people they're arresting, but they police the black neighborhoods, colored neighborhoods, more intensely, and uh, that, of course, is another reason why the um, community is not particularly friendly to the police. Currently, there are 15 black officers that have filed a complaint on racial discrimination within the Kansas City Police Department. So that's another indication that there's probably some morale and cultural problems at that way. There is a complaint department within the Kansas City Police Department that handles citizen complaints, and 97 of the complaints that are brought to, and these are still figures from this police scorecard, uh, that are brought before the police department are found in favor of the police. So 3% of the time they acknowledge that maybe their police officer did something wrong. But compare that to what's happened recently with lawsuits against the police. And this part is not from this is local information I'm giving you now about the uh, lawsuits. In the last 8 years, over $10 million were paid out by the Kansas City Police Department. That's our tax dollars for police misconduct of one kind or another. And I used to think that was pretty bad, but if you've been following the news lately, uh, just this year, um, a total of $7,110,000 has been agreed to be paid out already this year. That includes 6 cases that one of them is for $5 million and 900,000, 725,000, 325,000, and and I, and other details of that. But it's a huge amount of money, and it is it's another way that shows that there's really problems between the community and the police department. It also, I think, um, makes the community less responsive and less trusting, and that cuts into the effectiveness of the police department. And this is not because Kansas City is starving the police department, and they're running on a shoestring and can't afford to do it right. Um, the police scorecard ranks Kansas City in the lower third of police departments, and still the lower third of these 104 that I'm talking about, in terms of they spend more money uh, for the size of the community they serve than the other uh, two-thirds of these 104 departments. In other words, they're spending a lot of money in relation to the other departments, but yet we're having these problems. They have an overall ranking that uh, is just a collection of some of the other variables that the police scorecard uses. Um, it's one of them is police departments that don't focus on just the smaller um, crimes, but really focuses more on the major crimes and more serious crimes. And so, the police department that focus on the serious crimes is rated higher than the others. That's part of it. Using less force in making arrests and dealing with the public is another part of that. Accountability and transparency is another part of that. And then financial efficiency that I talked about just a little bit ago. And of the 104 police departments, Kansas City and Chicago are at the bottom. Um, the two highest are Charlotte in North Carolina and El Paso, Texas, and everybody else is in the middle. Um, so there are problems, and there I think there are ways that we could uh, there's lots of room that this police department could improve um, if they would work with city council and other interested groups. So what do we do about this? What's the strategy? How would we approach this? More Squared is got a program that we're going to try to identify 44,000 Kansas City, Missouri voters, and we're also interested in Missouri voters included uh, that would favor local control, just as in a basic principle. And that's where you come in. Um, if uh, we have it is not a petition. It may come to a petition sometime later, but we are simply creating a database of the number of people that we've talked to that would support local control. And so we have here two clipboards with a place for you to sign your name and address and your uh, zip code, or well, yeah, your address, but and also your email address. Now, More Squared will not publish those names. We are simply creating a database, and we will. The approach we're going to take here is that once we've collected these, we will go to individual state senators and state representatives and say, we've talked to X number of people in your district that favor local control. Would you support a bill in the legislature uh, to make that change? And we're doing that this year, and probably we'll be doing it again next year too. We think that in time that there will probably be a city referendum to this idea, but we're on this for the long haul, and this is a first approach. So if you would support that, that would be very good, except we would like a little more too. And now if you could give me Yeah, it's up there already. Um, we have a form that makes this easy for you to talk to your friends and neighbors, relatives and enemies even, and uh, simply uh, get their opinion. And if they are registered voters and are supportive of local control in general, then we would like to have their name and addresses so we can put them on the list to help talk to these politicians. And so I am today asking if that's something you would be interested in doing. We have more of these sheets on the back side of those. And before we leave, I'd be glad to give you one of those. And you could, at your leisure in the next 2 or 3 weeks or month or whatever, talk to the people you know and ask them about that, and then turn those in to me later, and we will put those in the database. And that's primarily our first approach on this. Um, I do have some information about Proposition 4, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I thought at this point would be a good time to open it for comments or questions that you might have.
Thank you, Clark. At this point, we're going to take up a collection in support of the forum. Um, and then we're now going to have questions and answers. Uh, please don't make any speeches yet. We can do that afterwards. And everybody gets a question, one question, and then before we give another question to the individual. One quick question I had is the people you want to sign, do they need to be a resident of Missouri?
Yes, they do. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Uh, so, do we have anybody who has a question that they would come up?
Hi.
Hi.
Um, how can we use language effectively to counter the whole idea that they're defunding the police?
Well, obviously, it hasn't been too effective so far. Um, uh, I think it's important to point out that the city has voluntarily funded the police over and above what was required by the state. Um, and the focus here is efficient, effective policing. And um, I think it's pretty well accepted that that takes money. You get what you pay for. And my experience in the community is that um, it's not people not wanting to have police. And this is, I've had some experience in the inner city and the black area, and they very much want and need police officers. And they are not asking for less policing. They're asking for uh, safer uh, policing. So it isn't a matter of how much money. It's a matter of working with the police uh, in a constructive, supportive way. Uh, yes, policing is a very difficult thing to do, and it is dangerous, and people are going to get hurt, and there are times when the police need to shoot somebody. There's no question of that. But comparing to other departments, there ought to be ways, and I'm sure they know ways that can do this without being anti-police.
I'm sure you're aware that the city council has both in-district council persons and at-large council persons, and they don't all agree with each other on policies and what to do. So I understand that you're not advocating for a particular stance on how a new system would work, but nevertheless, the city council would have some input, presumably, on what would get done. So, what kind of problems do you anticipate might occur with the differing standpoints and points of view of all the city council persons in relation to the police?
I'm probably not very good at predicting the city council, um, but you're right. Uh, that's why we have district representation within the city. North Kansas City and South Kansas City and East and Western parts have different needs and interests and approaches, and that will have to be worked out some way. I think that's a democratic process that will, at this point, we are not. We realize that's going to be the case, but um, we think that could be worked out if uh, if it was given the opportunity. I That has been part of the problem, in that uh, the various parts of the city feel like they are treated differently and in ways they don't appreciate, I think, and their own representatives bring that to city council meetings and whatnot. But I don't have an answer how we're going to get there.
Claudine here had a question. She wants to know, how did the city of St. Louis manage to uh, regain control of their police department? What did they do to actually make that happen?
I'm not really very good at that. I have talked to a person, actually one of the employees at uh, Moore Squared now, that is from Kansas City, and she talked with me about that a little bit. But it was a matter of the groups in St. Louis coming together and trying to develop a strategy and then convince the public that that was helpful. Uh, we have no illusions that the present um, legislature and governor are going to be supportive of that. But if it is clear that a large percentage of Kansas City supports that, I think that can change, that can move. Um, it's a matter of grassroots uh, getting together and working on it, I think. I, that's all I can say about it. It took them 100 years, so it's not easy.
Good morning. Our YouTube monitor person, Craig LeBeau, says, doesn't the commission help reduce the corruption and police brutality that was characteristic of the department for many decades? It's sort of a question and an opinion.
Yes, I don't think these uh, very critical um, performance measures or metrics that I um, listed are they're not new. That's as and they're not unique to Kansas City. Look at Kansas City, Kansas. They have had all kinds of problems uh, with crimes not being solved, and if you read the paper about that, there um, that's a problem too. It's um, I think there are ways that it has changed in that um, now the popular population is flooded with guns, and it's one thing to arrest somebody that is unarmed and the best they do is have a knife. That's not nearly as dangerous as it is now, and so that's very different than it was even 30 or 40 years ago. So policing gets more complicated as there's more hostility and the citizenry is armed. Um, So it isn't a new problem. Um, but the culture within the police department, I think, can be changed. Um, most police officers are not uh, looking to shoot first or to abuse the person that they arrest. Most police are honest, hardworking, dedicated people that are doing a hard job for not much money and really not much sympathy from the community. But there are a few people in the police department that, like on two of these major um, court settlements, one of uh, the two of the people that have been caused or were in a situation where the police department now has agreed to give up a good deal of money. They have been working together, and they were present at two different instances. Well, that suggests that maybe there is a culture problem. Maybe there's if there was more effective ways of dealing with a few number of police officers, that might be effective. Um, but that's a matter that the police department has to handle, but they need to be motivated to handle it. And it doesn't do much good for any of you to go down to the police commission meetings and say they should do that because the governor is the one they're pleasing, not here. And so there isn't much accountability for it.
I'm asking this for Claudine. She wants to know if St. Louis was successful, uh, maybe we should hire somebody from there. I guess the real question would be, can we learn from their organization? And I'm sure people are trying to do that. How they got it done.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm not the person that's really knows much about that. But you're right. That's what we need to do. We need to talk to them, and we need to look at what kind of system they have now, and decide whether or not that's what we want or something a little different. They may have some hindsight that would be helpful to us too.
Do you have some thoughts about the somewhat militarization of the police department? Um, Years back, there was some funds from the federal government to come here, and they built these SWAT teams and SWAT machines. And in my neighborhood, they were taking old houses and practicing shooting into these houses,
Mhm.
scaring the whole neighborhood about it. But could you have some thoughts on that?
I think I have some understanding of why they did that uh, when the riots happened. Um, yes, I know, but when the riots did happen, the police, um, I don't think felt like they had good control, and um, of course there is uh, I think a significant portion of the national population that think the police should be armed more heavily and should be quicker to shoot than uh, so. But I also think that has a pernicious effect on the local people. They see that, and they see that it's easier to look at the police in a negative way than if your main contact with the police is uh, on the street, uh, and their uh, friendly encounters with kids playing basketball in the back lot or that sort of thing. Um, so it's I believe, if maybe I'm not right about this, but I think that there's less emphasis on that now than there was a few years ago.
I've got a question. Uh, excuse me. Uh, what is the opinion of this change by the police officers themselves is represented by their union. I believe they have a union.
Yes, they do.
Would the police union be in favor of this, or do you know?
I can't speak for the union, but um, in my personal talking to people about this, I talked to a friend of mine who has a relative who who has been a police officer. Uh, and so this is third hand kind of thing, but that particular individual thought that it probably would be a good thing. I think the police union is concerned that uh, they they need to protect the retirement benefits and the money and they need, of course, to protect the payment. And so they will be interested in that part of it. Um, if this change happens in a way that is um, transparent and they have uh, their voice can be heard in the process, I would think that they'll be neutral or they will have good suggestions about how it might work. Um, the 15 officers that are suing the police department, I suspect they wouldn't mind having some help outside.
How do conservatives justify being obsessed with local control when it comes to issues like gay marriage and abortion and even a lot of financial issues, but then suddenly when it comes to funding of the police and control of the police, they don't want that anymore?
Well, it does seem inconsistent to me. Uh, I think we all sometimes think compartmentally. And if it sounds good, it may be inconsistent, but it sounds good. I really don't know. I think um, that has not been a strong enough uh, disconnect to change public behavior or change public uh, to keep conservatives from opposing this kind of thing. Um, you are th- maybe this is the time to talk a little bit about Proposition 4, the the Kansas, the Missouri constitutional amendment number 4 that we'll vote on Tuesday. Um, Senator Tony Lukemeyer, I'm sorry, um, was very upset when the mayor tried to negotiate with the police commission, and he's the um, majority whip in the Senate, and so uh, he introduced a bill that would change the ratio of the amount required by the city for the police from 20 to 25%, and that passed. And then there became questions about, is that constitutional? Doesn't that violate the Hancock Amendment to the Constitution that says the state cannot enforce a unfunded mandate? So Senator Lukemeyer's response to that was to introduce another bill, which is Proposition 4, that says we'll make, in this case, for Kansas City or any police department run by the governor, um, that's constitutional. Um, it seems to me that is playing to his base. Uh, his district is Buchanan County and Platte County. Um, most of that, of course, is not Kansas City, but uh, he's very effective at that's. Uh, I'm not sure that Kansas City has the power at this point to keep that from happening. the statewide vote on that could easily go against for that and require the city to put in that much money. It seems that was the response. He interpreted what the mayor had done as defunding the police, and so he's working against that. Um,
Excuse me, but I'm still unclear on how it happened in the first place that Kansas City and St. Louis were given over to the state. I'm still confused.
okay. um, at the time of the Civil War, Missouri was really split. It's not down the middle, but it was very. It wasn't at all clear which way. Um, Lincoln was afraid that it might join the Confederacy, uh, and a lot of people in the state, well, a lot of people felt very strongly on both sides of that, and so the governor, um, in both cases, the Confederate governor at first, and then the following governor that was a Unionist, saw that um, whoever had control of the police departments probably could make the difference. And so they just simply, and at that point they had the power to do it, and so they did. Um, and whether that was good, bad, or otherwise, really is beside the point. It happened, and and it stayed that way a long time, and it would have stayed that way if Tom Pendergast hadn't been a force to be reckoned with. But he had the power to. The governor wants to please this guy because he can deliver a lot of votes, and um, that's how it got started.
Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mark. That was very informative. In just a few minutes, we'll the folks that want to go to the service will leave for the service, and if you're available to discuss for further discussion, that's what we'll do.
I, I would like to have just a short time right now to invite any of you who are interested in helping in this. I would like to give you a form that you could go collect names on your own. There are not enough people in Moore Squared or all the rest of these organizations to get that many names. And so if you're willing to work on that, see me at the end of this, and I can give you a form and you can work on it. And I have a basic fact sheet that goes with it, so it gives you some background information besides what I've said here. So
That'll be fine.
thank you.
I just want to let you know before we go to that stage that next week the program is Defending Free Speech with Toriano Porter. He's a national award-winning opinion writer with the Kansas City Star editorial board. So that should be a very interesting and a timely program. So thank you for attending the forum. And if you would like to stick around and talk to Clark about these forums, please do so. Well, if you're, yeah, we'll go in the library to do that. Is the library available? Yeah. Okay, we'll do that in the library.